Hi everybody and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am naturopath Fiona Chin, co-founder of Kidney Coach and Kaigenesis. If you have a decline in EGFR or an increase in cystatin C or elevated creatinine, we might have a supplement for you. And I'm joined again today by the wonderful, the fabulous, the ever so beautiful Stephanie Modavis. Stephanie is a regular on the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. She's part of the Kidney Coach team. If you haven't seen any previous podcasts with Stephanie, please go and watch them because this might be a big, deep one to jump in and watch first. But Stephanie is a naturopath. She is a health coach. And really what makes Stephanie such an asset and a valuable member of the community is she's gone through 2 transplants. She really has an in-depth journey herself that she's navigated very successfully. She's worked in the medical system extensively, helping people navigate that. She understands transplants inside and out and has done, I think, a total of, do we count, 6 years on dialysis? So when it comes to lived experience, out of anyone that I podcast with and talk to and anyone on our team, Stephanie actually is the expert in this area of what actually living with chronic kidney disease looks like and how to navigate it successfully and still find joy in the day-to-day life. So Stephanie, thank you. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this one. It's going to be a little deep, as you said, but it's important. I'd encourage everyone watching this to keep a nice open mind and see how it goes. So we're going to talk about near-death experience today and some of the cool metaphysical happenings that can occur when we have these experiences. And I'm also going to do a brief introduction of a guy who I think is just a really incredible scientist, mystic, polymath. His name is Emanuel Swedenborg. He's written many books, and he has just a awesome framework that's really simple and digestible to talk about what he knows about the afterlife. So that's the direction that we're going to head into today.
We felt like this was an important topic. So just before you dive into it, do you want to just give some people some context of why we're talking about, people are like, oh, why are you talking about death with kidney disease? But just so people have an understanding of why we're doing it.
Right, absolutely. So, in fact, in my first slide or so, it's something that I address. It's a way to, nobody likes to talk about death. I mean, unless you're kind of an existentialist or somehow you enjoy that kind of stuff. But most people don't. Most people avoid it. And when you're diagnosed with a chronic kidney disease, that's basically the majority of the fear I think that we experience is like, oh my gosh, am I going to die? So in my experience, living, my gosh, more than half my life with kidney disease and having had all sorts of experiences, I've learned to have a healthy relationship with death. And the experiences that I've had have led me to open up a really broader perspective, which helps me to live with my disease, my processes, my illness, my transplant process, whatever you want to label it as, with a lot more ease, less stress, less anxiety around this kind of stuff. And it just allows me to live life more fully when I can just boldly stand in the face of this topic and just face it. So I think it's important because every patient's experience is different. And if you have kidney disease, usually, or it can often you can end up with surgeries, you can end up needing dialysis, you can have very scary moments that you face your own mortality in certain events. I know a lot of chronic kidney disease patients, if they've been on the journey a very long time, they've had a couple of scares. So our goal here today, as I said, is to reduce fear of death and to discuss the afterlife. We can define death as not the end, but rather a transition. And we're going to talk about my personal NDE experience and, as I said, an introduction to Emanuel Swedenborg. So here we go. You ready?
Let's do it.
I mean, some people might be seeing this already, like, oh my gosh, but it's once you open up to this, it's really beautiful. It's really mystical. There's something within your soul that just feels that something about this process is true, that it's a transition and not some sort of abrupt ending.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start I had two near-death experiences, but they were distinctly different. So everybody that has a near-death experience, there can be similar qualities or things that happen that may seem similar throughout the NDE community, but a lot of different things cause them. Everybody's experiences is slightly different. My first near-death experience to me feels like more of that typical NDE experience that you hear the community or people that have experienced this talk about. And it involved a physical problem where my physical body was actually going into a death state. So my first NDE was at 24 years of age, about 23 to 24. I was struggling with my autoimmune disease, lupus. It was very, very hard to control. The doctors had told me many times, we don't know what else to do with you anymore. No medicine, no experimental drug, nothing is calming your immune system down. It's just, we don't know what to do with you anymore. And what happened was I was continuing to deteriorate physically, no matter how much I was eating well and doing the best to take care of myself. It was just this disease process had a mind of its own, so to speak. And they actually, I went in to get a surgery actually, and they were thinking about starting me on dialysis. And my kidneys were already starting to be under the appropriate level to live without dialysis. I think I was at like, I don't know, maybe like 16% or something like that. And what happened was my doctor said, let's just get a catheter in you just in case. It was kind of like, let's just have it there in case we need it. And I had a lot of anxiety around the surgery. And I was asking a lot of questions about the Tessio catheter, the permacath that I had put in my chest. I was asking a lot of preemptive questions. And they were just saying, don't worry about it. We do this all the time. Not a big deal. Like you'll be fine. And I remember saying to the surgeon over and over again, I said, which side are you going in? And he was like, I don't understand, like why are you so hell-bent on like what side I'm putting this in? And it was just something, even as they gave me the anesthesia, like I was like, which side are you putting this in? Which side? And I said, please don't go on this side, the left side. I said, please don't go on the left side. And he's like, well, why? I said, I don't know. Just please don't go on the left side. And I had this overwhelming intuition that I don't know, just don't put it over on this side. And what happened, unbeknownst to me at the time, was when they put me under, one of two things could have happened. What I was told was that I hemorrhaged into my lungs when they had me under. And later on, I came to question whether or not I had just been so overloaded with fluid that when they lied me down flat, that somehow I became overwhelmed with fluid. Don't know exactly what happened. I don't know that they know exactly what happened, but I woke up from that experience. I was just supposed to get a Tessio catheter put in, and I woke up and I realized I had been out for a couple of days, and I woke up getting dialysis, and I had a bandage on the left side of my chest. So he must have tried to go into the left side and couldn't get it in, and then had to go over to the right. So it was when I first woke up, even though I wasn't very sharp, I was like, what? And I could feel that he did go in here, but it ended up over here on the other side. So I didn't really know exactly what happened, but let's get back to the NDE experience. During that time I was under, um, I suddenly awoke, and all the doctors were around me just yelling, breathe, breathe, Stephanie, breathe, breathe, breathe. And I remember gasping for air, like trying to get air in. And I remember looking over to my right and seeing my entire family, like right outside the door. And of course, something in my mind was like, oh, this must be serious. My whole family is right there. Right. So of course I found out later that they got all called in saying like, we don't know that we're going to be able to bring her back. Um, so after I woke up, heard the doctors saying breathe, was struggling to breathe, saw my family, About that time, I immediately went back down. And this is when I just showed up in a meadow. I just showed up in a beautiful meadow, and it was quiet. I was totally disconnected from the breathe, 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 like intensity of the ER or OR. And I just I just appear in a meadow, and it's beautiful and it's quiet and it's serene, and I can see my feet like walking in the grass. And I had somebody next to me, and it very much looked like this Native American Indian chief that I have here. He was old. I could tell that he was a wise elder chief. Like that's what I could tell.
Mhm.
And he was walking with me. He was very close to me. And it was very intimate, even though no words were spoken. And in fact, I believe we communicated without him really even talking. We were just walking next to each other. And I remember it was just peaceful. He was comforting me. And he said, "How are you doing?" And I said, like, "I'm good." And he said, "You have to go back."
Mm.
And I said, "Okay." Like I just was, it's hard to explain. And near death experience is very hard to explain because it's just so otherworldly. But the incredible amount of peace, the serenity of the area. I had a guide with me, comforting me the whole way. And it was just that quick. And it was just out of that light. And then I woke up a couple of days later, actually receiving my first dialysis treatment, is how I woke up 2 or 3 days after that experience. Um, so I was in another place and another time, and it was amazing how comforting and supportive it was. And there was some sort of agreement that you've got to go back. There was some sort of agreement between both of us, like this isn't the end. You're going to go back. Like it's going to be okay, but you're going to go back. Waking up from that, obviously it was disorienting. And for a few days, I was like, well, why did I leave that peaceful place? And why am I back here?
Yeah.
It was a little bit of a loss. It was like, you couldn't distinguish between which one was reality. And so it didn't feel like, oh, I'm just so happy to be back here and alive. It just, that one felt almost more real than being back in my body in the hospital. So for a few days, I was a little confused. I was like, oh, like the place was so amazing. Where to go? What happened? Like, where to go? And but you fall back into your body, and then you become more aware, and you wake up and you realize people are like, oh, you're lucky to be alive. And you just kind of fall back into that mindset again. So that was my first near-death experience. And I wanted to read this from him. This particular guy's name is Chief Walking Buffalo, and it says, as an Indian, I might have had great reason for hatred, but I know that even I can forgive those who have wronged me. And in my healing journey at that stage, personally, when the doctors had said to me so many times, Stephanie, I don't know what else to do for you. I'd seen so many doctors. That's when I realized that my only choice was to really go within and really pray, to God, to the creator of the universe, and say, hey, they got nothing down here for me. Like, what do you got for me? Is there anything I can do? You know? And intuitively, the first thing, and I tell this to everybody that I work with, the first thing that what was amazing is that when I exhausted the doctor's advice and said, okay, I got no one else but you, it immediately started to communicate with me. And I was
Mm.
like, oh, shoot, I should have done this sooner. Right? Like I should have developed this relationship a lot sooner. And I was very young at the time, but now I do all the time. But as soon as I communicated with it and said, hey, they got nothing down for me, you got something for me, it was immediately like, yes, your first step is to forgive those people who wronged you. As I said, the first step in healing. This is what I want you to do. And it, again, it's like you have that resistance of like, well, some of those people did a lot of bad things to me, like, don't you know that? But it was just like, I'm asking you to do this for me because you asked to heal. And in order to heal, I can't have you hang on to this resentment and this sort of energy in your body. And you just have to find a way to understand that I know why it happened and I can serve the justice better than you can holding it in your body. So, okay, then it gets real freaky. So, years later, after my transplant, after my recovery, after I got back to life, about 10 years after that first experience, I had another experience. And it was prior to my second transplant, but I wasn't that ill to be imagining all of this because this is going to feel very, very esoteric and mystical. And, trust me, there were no drugs involved, but it might sound like there were drugs involved. But I'm going to be very honest with everybody. I met a guy. This is the beginning of every bad story, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I met a guy who ironically was also in the kidney field. And we created a relationship and I started helping out patients that he was familiar with. And we started this kind of relationship where we were serving each other patients from different angles. And it was such an incredible relationship that we had to the degree where we both would say when we first met, it felt like the relationship was fully developed. It was like, oh, there you are. Where have you been? Like, I've been going through this whole life looking for you. Like, where have you been? Like, there you are. So it was a very unique sort of soul connection from the start. And many of us have these experiences, whether we have them a lot or whether we have them rarely, or there's just one person who you feel like you really have this profound connection with. This was really mystically what would be called like a mirror, like a mirror of your soul, like someone
Mhm.
who's kind of like your equal yet opposite. It again, it's unusual. A lot of people talk about this. If you're not familiar with it, it does sound very woo-woo, so I don't want to really go too deep into it. But these sorts of relationships catalyze incredible growth and often in an ambush fashion. It can be
Mm.
quick, it can be hard, it can be uncomfortable, it can just break you open and rip down all of your personas to just like get you to the reason why you're really here. And it can be very disorienting. But there's also a lot of beauty and love that comes with it as well, or you wouldn't continue on the journey. So somehow God knows, like, okay, you two have a real opportunity to catalyze each other into incredible growth and evolution. And I'm going to really allow you guys to love each other because it's going to be really hard. And if you don't really love each other, you're going to leave each other. So that relationship really catalyzed a lot of high level energy in me. And it was where I felt like my vibration, my frequency was extremely high and extremely becoming more and more ungrounded. When you're just getting very, very just out there in this state. And what's interesting is you can get a lot of information when you feel like you're connected on a higher level. Some people call them downloads, whatever you want to call them. But what happened was for an extended period of time, let's say about 6 months, if not a little bit longer, I was way higher in my density, my energy, my frequency than I typically would have been. And it was getting to the point where I was getting very disassociated with my body in real life. I wasn't grounded. I wasn't grounded. Although I was channeling a lot of information, I needed to get my feet on the ground. And what happened was, I call this my mystical awakening, is one day out of the blue, I was sitting on my couch, gazing out the window. And I recognize now that I wasn't in the healthiest state, even though it felt very blissful. I felt I was in complete bliss. It was
Mm.
really like a samadhi, like a oneness experience, okay, prolonged. And I was gazing out the window and I realized like I don't feel like I'm even in the I didn't realize this then, but I wasn't even really in the 3D dimension anymore. I was out there. And I was laying there in bliss And all of a sudden, it felt like an energy came through my window and it felt so big and so powerful. It just snapped me awake. And it was just like, oof. And I just like was laying there all blissed out and I just kind of got shaken, awoke. And to me, it felt very much like the presence of God, or even like a figure of like Jesus, but it felt like a God presence. It was energy. I could feel energy all around me. I couldn't see a being, but I could feel this powerful, intense energy and snapped me awake. And I remember looking, I didn't see anything, but I was looking at the energy. And he, I would say God, was trying to communicate with me. And he said, all right, Stephanie, like enough is enough here. Like, do you want to stay or do you want to go? It was very clear. It's what he said. Do you want to stay or do you want to go? And at that point, being awoken so quickly, I was still a little disoriented. And I was like, I actually thought about it. And I tell people I've never been one I've never been suicidal or wanted to purposely end my life or anything like that. But again, that bliss state, almost like I experienced walking with the Native American, like it happened again. Um, it's just it's so profound to know this intelligence that exists beyond our life, and it's so loving and it's just so beautiful. I said, let me think about it for a second. And what's so funny is this is when I realized that the divine had a sense of humor, because I started hearing the Jeopardy song in my head. Do 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 do. Like he was like, this is how much time you have to decide whether or not you want to stay or you want to go, right? So I thought that was humorous. And by the time the song ended, I had decided there's something yet for me to do here. And he said, okay. And he said, what I need you to do is get up, roll your yoga mat out, and make sure you have something heavy tonight to eat, even like a burger. And what I realized very quickly after that conversation was that God, the sacred, the divine, was asking me to get back into my body, to get embodied again, to put my feet on the mat, to come back into my body, to eat something denser, to pull myself back into my body. That's what he was asking me to do. And the next morning, when I did that, I listened to instructions. I rolled my mat out and I did have a burger that night. And I said to myself, okay, I'm going to get my feet on the ground here and get back to my life and figure out what am I doing here, right? And I said, it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. The next morning I woke up and I literally felt, and I said, and I've told this story many times, like God dropped me from the Empire State Building and I like crashed on concrete. I just felt like I had been so high in my density that when I said I want to stay here and I followed this instructions, it was like all of that density just fell right back into matter. And I felt so heavy. I was at my desk and I was like, oh, how am I gonna do this? And I was like, I think I made a mistake. And he's like, no, this is your choice. You figure out now where you are, how to get back to where you need to be. Let's do it right. So, such a profound relationship and communication and guidance that I had been getting the moment I opened to having a relationship with the sacred, with the divine. So much beautiful guidance. So that was my journey of literally feeling like I fell back like a fallen angel. You know, that sounds bad, but like I fell back into my body and the density. And from that point forward, I realized that the spiritual world and the afterlife is just as real, if not more real than this world. And I value and cherish this world and everything that goes on here in my life. And I would never want to be removed from here until God says that it's time. but I have so much confidence and comfort within me that I've experienced these ongoing events where I get to be connected to the spiritual world, that the fear of death has truly left me, which changes your life. So, real quick, this guy, Emanuel Swedenborg, I've been following a
Yes.
YouTube channel called Off the Left Eye for several years. I actually met the people who run that channel. They're amazing. And this guy he's just real incredible. Let me tell you about him a little bit. So he's an 18th century scientist, theologian, and mystic. He was like a polymath science guy, and then late in life had a massive spiritual experience and awakening, and proceeded to write great works on the afterlife after he already had this like successful scientific career. He then went this totally other direction. He was renowned in anatomy, physiology, and psychology before having a spiritual crisis, which opened ongoing experiences of the spiritual world for him. He claimed conscious visits to heaven and hell and realms in between, very similar to what modern NDEs describe. He describes death as a gentle transition. When respiration and circulation stop, man does not die, but is only separated from the corporeal body. Man, when we die, only passes from one world into another. And this is exactly what I experienced both times. It was a gentle, you're here and now you're here. And there was no dysregulation, no fear. There was just so much support. And I mean, if that can give any comfort to anybody, I mean, this has been experienced by a lot of people. And it's really incredible, actually. So Swedenborg reports being put into near-death states himself. Bodily senses faded, inner thoughts were perfectly clear, and a sense of being drawn out of the body. Can you see? It's kind of a cool picture. I don't know if you can see
Yeah, it
that, but
is. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I can.
Modern NDEs echo this same thing. People often report no pain at the moment upon their death experience, only release, peace, and a continuity of self. When the next step of the process would be awakening with angels and loved ones. So immediately after death, angels are present, whose only goal is to keep the person in thoughts of love and eternal life. Communication is universal language, a direct sharing of thought and feeling without any misunderstanding whatsoever. So I experienced this with the first near death, is that communication was almost telepathic. And it was just so clear, just full of love, so clear. None of the garbage that we have sometimes interfering with our communications that we have nowadays, just
Yeah.
perfectly. Swedenborg also says that many don't even realize that they have died because they still feel like themselves in a body with all senses and memories intact. This happened to me. The second death that I had is when I was having those very mystical out of body experiences in this other realm. One thing I said to myself when I told you that I got on my yoga mat and I was coming back into my body, I remember going like this. And I remember saying to myself, did I die? And I'm like, I don't think I died. Like, I feel like I still have a body. And then I remember a bit of anxiety coming up. And it was like, oh my God, like, did you die? Like, are you here? Or like that little egoic thing was like, wait, hold on, I want to figure this out. And immediately what happened was the ego silenced, and God said to me, if you were dead right now, would you be okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And he was like, okay, don't worry. So interesting. It's so
Yeah.
interesting. So Swedenborg talks a lot that when the transition from life into death is more new, that it's so gentle and it's so familiar that literally people still are like, they feel like they have their body. They're still like everything seems totally normal. It's not like a shocking, like all of a sudden you're a ball of energy and you don't know what the heck happened. It's like it's almost like you feel still exactly the same as a human on Earth. So it take they take their time. Like let me go on here. So Swedenborg says there's three stages. So the first stage, life feels surprisingly normal after death. we are in our outer self, very similar to life on earth. People look, speak, and behave as they did here, and initially often believe they are still in the physical world in their physical body. Friends and relatives who have already passed recognize us, greet us, and begin gently teaching us about eternal life and the new world that we're in. Pretty cool. The second stage, this is a good one. And it's so funny because so much of modern human potential movement and consciousness kind of takes a very similar trajectory with some of this stuff here that we talk about. So the second stage is when the true self emerges. So gradually, our inner self, remember we transitioned first more from the outer perspective, gradually our inner self is opened. Our real intentions and deepest love or strongest desires come to the surface. Everything inconsistent with our true inner love falls away. We can no longer pretend to be something we are not. And he often talks about how you start to be magnetized, attracted towards people who have the same loves and same desires and same inner intentions, kind of like your soul tribe. The more your true self evolves, you kind of start to go along, kind of like different cells in the body or organ systems in the body or systems in the body. You kind of start to find your system where you belong with your people as your true self emerges. For people whose inner life is loving and sincere, this feels like waking from sleep into greater light. For those who are centered in selfishness or cruelty, their inner confusion and misery become more and more obvious. So, this is kind of like a separation that can happen. So, he often says, if you already have been working in your earthly life on your spiritual life and being a good person and growing and evolving, it's a little easier. But again, once that true self emerges, if there's a lot of work that still has to be done, or you're holding on to resentment or anger, frustration, or hatred, it becomes more and more obvious in the afterlife. So, heaven and hell as states of desire. After death, people are in their desire or intention. Our ruling love draws us to communities that match it. Heaven is a state of joy, expanded awareness, and shared goodness, not a reward for belonging to the right religion. People from many cultures form the church of the Lord through living in love. Hell as a state of mind. Hell is not a place where devils torture people. It is the state of people who cling to the selfish, harmful desires and who torment others out of their own malice. The three stages again in the void. Swedenborg describes three stages. The first is the outer life, which feels like earth. Second, the inner life, revealing our true self. And then instruction and preparation for heaven for the willing. So the nice thing about Swedenborg's philosophy and what I really resonate with is that even those who enter the afterlife in that selfish state and maybe have a lot of work to do, they always have an opportunity for reformation. It's just a willingness to try to let go of some of those behaviors. Whereas, some other religions or, it's kind of like, well, you get one chance and it's heaven or hell and you're screwed if you, and it creates more fear, so this model, this philosophy, what Swedenborg describes, pretty much everybody continues to get a chance as time goes on. The second stage resembles the void. Some NDEs report a place of self-confrontation where only our inner nature is present. This is almost kind of like a dark night of the soul, or like when you start doing self-work or shadow work, it's like a real self-confrontation. Like I really got to look at myself and really start to develop where you know, need to do some work upon myself to be a better person. If love is present in us, this becomes a doorway toward the light. If not, people may remain in darker states until they're ready to change. So, how to live now? The easy way to heaven. A heaven bound life is not about withdrawing from the world, it is about living a normal civic and moral life from a loving spiritual motive. It's kind of like there's a lot of great movies. There's this movie that comes to mind now. I can't think of what it is, but it's just like what we're doing now. And a lot of people in the human potential movement and a lot of people who care about consciousness and evolution is, how do I face myself, and how do I work on my darker, my shadow side, and how do I become a better person? How do I learn to love my neighbor? How do I learn to love in a world that's so divisive and just really hard to love right now? You know, they're making it harder and harder and harder to not participate in all of this attention grabbing and hatred. And, you know, it's a real test for people who are working on preparing themselves, you know, for their own spiritual awakening. It's a real test to understand there's a lot of corruption and there is evil in the world. And how do I navigate it without it consuming what's really important, which is really me trying to be the best person that I possibly can and working on my own spiritual evolution. So my process to my afterlife, whenever that is more graceful.
Yeah.
So we don't have to become monks. We just need to do what is honest and fair because it aligns with divine love and not just social reputation. Small daily choices, refusing what we know is unjust, choosing kindness, quietly shape our strongest desire and our future spiritual home. So it's not super complicated.
No, it's really not.
You know, it's really not. So, comfort and hope about death. Death is a seamless crossing, lovingly guided, in which we wake up still ourselves, surrounding by care, not abandoned to terror. Our deepest love gently organizes eternity. If we cultivate love, compassion, and integrity now, we have nothing to fear then. That's really what I wanted to share, and I want to hear what you think about everything. What do you think about
Oh
everything?
no, I love it. You know, I love these topics, and I think, you know, Zach Bush talks about this, and he's triple board certified, but he did a lot of time with people crossing over and doing death work. And I think the problem in our society and with people like us with chronic disease is that death is such a thing to be feared because you lose everything. So there's this fear of losing everything and a fear of death and pain, everything that goes with it. And you know, the conversation around maybe it's just a transition and how that would shift for people and how that would be, you know, how that would change people's experience here on Earth. I also think that when we, you know, I wonder whether it's perpetuated deliberately that, you know, you die and all of those sort of things to keep people in a fear state, that if we knew it was a transition, I always love the saying, wherever you go, there you are, meaning when you die, you got to go with you. So you may as well just do the work and continue to work on yourself and be a good person, because even after death, that energy of who you are goes with you. And potentially, I believe in reincarnation, potentially it's a continuing thing of you keep going. So I think in that potential for that is, if that is what happens, and you know, who knows, it's that then you would continue to work on yourself and cultivate and kindness and service to others and all of those sort of things, because, you know, this isn't a one take all, it's a continuation of who you are and the possibility for growth and becoming an even better evolution of yourself. But back to Zach Bush, you know, he really talked about that when people with chronic disease are no longer a fear of this sort of death being the end process, and they do a lot of that with using magic mushrooms and psilocybin sort of stuff and acid trips, you know, to really help people overcome their fear of death. But then their last couple of, you know, especially cancer and end of life stuff, people no longer live out of that fear state. They become very accepting. They start to have this very different take on life at end of stage, and that anxiety disappears, and it actually helps make the transition easier and more peaceful. So I think there's a lot to be said for our society and the stigma we have around death, and then actually having these kinds of conversations to help people. The rate of chronic disease is going up, the rate of cancers are going up, and so I feel like these conversations are important. And the one thing none of us are ever going to escape is death. So, you know, it's something that's inevitable to happen to us. So having a conversation around it, and, you know, lots of traditions, and you know more about the Native American traditions of it being a normal part of culture. And I think our First Nations and Aboriginal elders here have the same sort of thing. It's like, it's just part of conversation. It's embraced in culture. So it just has a very different feel about it. So I think that's why it's so important. I also have had different experiences. I know when my dad passed away, and it was in the throes of COVID, and I'd been with him the week before, and I got COVID off him, and it was when we had to isolate, and I'm in Melbourne, Australia, so for anyone that doesn't know, we were like the most shut down place in the world, so we were pretty strict stuff, so I couldn't be with him when he passed away. And Mum called me that morning and said, look, the death rattles are really bad, I think your dad's going to transition today, do you want to say anything to him? She held the phone up to him, and at that point in time he was unconscious. And, you know, my dad and I are very close, and so I said everything I need to say. I just wanted to tell him that I loved him and all those sort of things. And she said, he's raising his eyebrows. And I said, can you hear me? And he raised his eyebrows again. And so Mum said, does raising your eyebrows mean yes? So he raised his eyebrows again. And she said, okay. So we were like, can you hear us? And he raised his eyebrows. And I said, are you in the light? And he raises his eyebrows. And we said, are you in any pain? And he frowned. So like frowning means no, he raises his eyebrows again. So I had this conversation with my dad, and he transitioned 2 hours later, and it was right as he was in the death state. And what he, through his eyebrow raising and lowering and asking questions, and because I've read books by Anita Moragiani and all of these sort of things, and my understanding and my faith around that sort of stuff is, so that prompted the questions that I asked. But I said, are you in the light? And he said, yes. And I said, can you see your friends and family? He said, yes. Any pain? No. You're in a blissful state? Yes. I did ask, like, the animals there? And he was like, no, it was family. He was with his dad, who died when he was 11. That was who he was mostly talking about. I think his mum was there as well. But that he was in no pain, he was okay. You know, he was ready to transition. And so when he passed away a couple of hours later, and I didn't get to be there with him, he waited for my sister to turn up, and then he passed away while she was there. But there was a lot of comfort in that, being able to have that conversation with him and know that he wasn't in pain and those sort of things, and that he talked about the tunnel and the light and having the, you know, family there to greet him. And yeah, so I think that was the most direct, profound experience I've had with that state. And as people know, I was in the Dr. Joe world for a very long time, and so I'd probably say I'm quite an advanced meditator. So in a meditative state, I've had very profound experiences of, I don't know what you want to call it, the other world. And to your point where you say it feels just as real as this world, that is my experience as well. I've had some pretty profound experiences where, you know, I'm in my body, but I'm completely in another world. I'm aware of it. And I remember my body was so fast asleep, but I was so clear of mind. And I remember looking up and I could see this light all around me. And I remember thinking, but if you know about the 5 metabolites that get produced from the brain when you're in what we call high gamma brain waves, and when you've activated the pineal gland, which was the state I was in, you release a lot of benzodiazepine, in a natural version of it. So it numbs your ability to think. So I remember going, oh, that's like my coherence field. My voice was like that because I was like so drugged out and from my own chemicals. And I remember a hand coming and touching the outside of the coherence field. And I remember the whole thing vibrating, and I could physically feel this. And then I remember shattering into like water droplets and going across the floor. And then I came out of my body and walked around the ballroom that we were in meditating. And what the crazy part was, at the end of that, I couldn't talk. I had to get picked up off the floor and carried back to my room. I was in your state, a very out of body state. It took me a while to come back into my body. And later that day, we were back in the ballroom setting up for a coherence healing. And Dr. Joe sees me across the room and does this. And I think, oh, I'm in trouble. What have I done? And I went across and he said, nice meditation. And I hadn't told anybody because I hadn't been able to speak for the longest time. And I was like, what are you talking about? He said, I saw you meditate this morning. He said, your entire energy field has shifted. He's like, you're just emitting light. And I was like, okay, this guy's a real deal, because I'm like, I hadn't told anybody. That was crazy. And I stayed in that. I was in an altered, heightened state for months after that. And I would only suggest it feels like someone had plugged me into oxytocin. I was in love with everything, like the lamppost. I was like, oh, such a little lamppost. I was in my body and functioning and doing stuff, maybe not as out of body as you talked about, but I was in the heightened love state for everything. So that was one experience. I did another meditation. And so I had lots, and then you start chasing it. So I'm looking for that feeling all the time. But I did have another crazy meditation experience years later. And I was sitting on the bed. I was away with my then husband. And I remember meditating. And I'd been meditating for 4 or 5 hours. And I was right out of my body. And I remember the meditation asks you to come back in. I couldn't get back in. And I remember opening my eyes and all I could see was purple. And I remember having, because I was doing a Carl Jung, so I was doing a Dr. Joe meditation, and I'd coupled it with some of Carl Jung's teachings from the Golden Book about where the soul resides in the body, and it was coupling all of that. So I'd gotten right out there. And I remember having a panic because I was like, I can't get back into my body. And I remember what I thought was my then husband, and he said, it's okay, I'm going to guide you back. And I felt a hand go over my heart, and it's like, breathe, come, and then I put my hand over the top. And I remember being guided through all this light and sort of intricate way to get back into my body. And then the meditation ended and I was like, oh, thank you, honey, for doing that. And I'm doing this. And then I opened my eyes. It's my own hand. I'm like, and then my then husband walked into the room and I said, did you put your hand on my heart during the meditation? She's like, no, I haven't been in here. So I'm like, okay. There was something, and it used his voice to like come and guide me back in, that was like looking after me and genuinely back into my body. That was also a very crazy experience. But that, and again, working in the Dr. Joe world for so long, the amount of times I've picked people up off the floor who had gone straight out into the universe. We'll talk about absolute love and feeling divine love and feeling completely everything was okay and at ease when they connect with, whether you call it the divine, God, Holy Spirit, whatever it is. And those, you will hear those stories time and time again. Sometimes complete remissions of disease happen in that state. I've had 3 or 4 people where they're in my groups and the meditation ends and everybody gets up to go, and you look around at your group and you've got people on the floor and you have to go and look after them. And when they come back, that people have spontaneous healings. I've been in that state a few times and no spontaneous healing for me, but that's okay. And then, yeah, if anyone's interested in more information about this, Anita Monajani's book, Dying to Be Me, is really good. I'd given it to my dad when he was in the process, still alive, but before he transitioned. And she has a very profound experience with, I think she had advanced leukemia, I want to say, and she was rushed into hospital, complete organ shutdown, and came out of her body. And she talks about remembering looking around and seeing everybody in the doctors and they're all panicking. And she's like, what's there to panic about? I feel amazing. And when she finally got back into her body and she was out for a while in a coma, she talks about she had a pretty spontaneous healing that happened. And she realised everything is love. It's all forgiveness. The divine is all loving and all of those sort of things. So, yeah, it's interesting because her experience very much resonated in your experience with, loving and communication very much resonates with people that I've directly had experience with that have experienced that. That's been my experience when I've done, really advanced meditation. And like I say, my dad was the direct one in a dying state where he talks about the classic tunnel, the family turning up, the being taken, all of those sort of things. So I think that whole fear around dying and that it's painful and all of those sort of things doesn't seem to be, at least in our experience, doesn't seem to necessarily be the case. And there's that other great book. Have you come across the author? He's a hypnotist and he ended up doing Life Between Lives.
Sounds familiar. Do you know who it is?
Oh, I can't remember. I can look it up. But he wrote the book Life Between Lives, and he did a lot of hypnosis, and his patients started to talk about being in between life incarnations and about it's a school and that we choose to come down and soul families and all the stuff that you'll hear in the spiritual text. And you referenced some of it in your experience. And he talked about people could, in their hypnotic states, transition and move through and talk about the schools and how the universe has a sense of humour or God has a sense of humour. And that there's classrooms, and when we go back, that very much similar to Swedenborg that you spoke about, it's very similar stuff. And so that's another really great book if people want more information about that. And he's written lots of books and has thousands of case studies where he's taking people through hypnosis and they come up with this information. It's not him, and he wrote about it. And so
Right. I've heard that too. A lot of people that do like quantum healing hypnosis, they go into these same kind of liminal spaces between the regular earthly realm and then this other realm. And that's why I'm such a huge advocate for people who are undergoing a spiritual awakening or want to work on spiritual evolution, because really what it's doing is bettering your life now by giving you tools to help you deal with the complexities of life that revolve around those sacred principles of love, forgiveness, and presence, and all of these beautiful things. But it's also just a key preparation for the afterlife experience. And with my experiences, the temporary nature of having our earthly life, it we know it's short and fleeting, but really after having these experiences, it becomes this recognition that it's like a blip in time, the earthly life, right? Like it's a very short period of time, and that this vaster eternity it actually is you know, goes on for a long time. And to prepare for that, to, like Swedenborg says, you know, if you're prepared, the transition is easier and more loving, and you find your community sooner than later. I mean, I've been trying to do all that stuff here on Earth, you know, like I'm
Yeah.
trying to do the same thing. So it's weird how kind of like we're trying to do the same thing here as we would be doing to prepare ourselves for a seamless afterlife transition. But you know, we get very addicted to the material and things, and we've become so dense in the material realm here, and our addictions to things and money and success and living forever, whatever it is, it's just
Yeah.
we're getting further and further away from just the grace of what we do have here and our ability to prepare for eternity. So I think that's the hardest thing that we face right now, is this somehow we've been in this uh downward spiral into materialism is really all that matters and the most important facet of the human experience. And although it is an important part, I think that people having these spiritual experiences more and more, and these awakenings that are happening, will hopefully get us back into a better balance between the material realm and our body, our physical body, and the nature of our inner state and our spiritual well-being.
I hope so. And I think too, you know, circling back to why we decided this podcast was so important around chronic disease, you know, and I'll let you speak to your experience, but I know for me, MS won't kill me, it doesn't shorten your lifespan, but it could potentially make it miserable, you know, like chronic pain, not being able to walk, you potential loss of bowel and bladder, that may or may not happen, but you know, that feeling like your physical body fails you. And then I think, you know, for me, rewriting the context that there's something greater than that. I have been in those spots where spontaneous healing can happen, and it hasn't happened. I have to believe there's a greater purpose behind dis-ease for me. And, you know, I think that just helps rewrite the narrative that's easy. And you and I have spoken about in other podcasts where you can get into self-blame, that you've done something wrong, that you've been punished. That if we see life potentially as a school, that I go, okay, maybe I chose this, you know, potentially for a, you know, greater evolution that I can't yet understand, that, you know, in the transition, the body will fall away and this isn't a forever thing. And that, you know, that there is more that, and we know we only see like, was it 0.009% of light spectrum, you know, bats and birds can see colours that we can't even see. And so there's a whole pile of things in our reality that are happening that we can't see, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. And so I think for us to ever understand, you know, why certain people have to experience certain things in our lives, I just don't think we can. And that's sort of where I ended up with my journey. And it was really important to me because prior to that, because I'd come from the personal development world where you're just not meditating enough if you haven't healed yourself, or you're just not that good, or it's karma and all of those kind of things, which are so not useful because it ends up making you feel like you're wrong or you've done something that you can't wrap your head around, to maybe it's part of your evolution and it's part of this process before you start to go back to where you actually came from and those kind of things, and that maybe there's an opportunity in here that I haven't yet seen. And like you, trying to live your best life with the circumstances that you're given is just, I think with chronic disease, another great way just to reframe it and to have a bit more purpose and meaning in life. At least it has been for me. And so I think that's why with chronic disease, these conversations are important, because I think it gives a reframe for people to help. It doesn't mean don't have a pity party or feel like that sort of stuff. Sometimes I need to do that sort of stuff. But I think also, the reality of it is it's never as bad as we think it is. And I can still have this amazing, fulfilling life. I can't go hanging off mountains like I used to and climbing stuff and traveling the way I want, but I derive meaning from doing other things. So I don't know what your thoughts about on that, but and how it helps you with living with kidney disease and all of those sort of things.
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's, as I mentioned, it's been a long time living with kidney disease. This happened when I was 19. I'm now 49. But if I could have adopted this sort of a perspective earlier in my journey, I would have reduced a lot of suffering and struggle and resistance. I mean, I just can't even tell you that if I would have adopted this broader perspective on life and death and healing and school, universal school, and what is my lesson and what is this teaching me? And of course, I'm not spontaneously healing because I am a perfectionistic control freak. So, this is my greatest lesson. Like, it just, if I could have just broadened my perspective way beyond the narrative I was getting from the modern medical system and just the limiting, the limiting nature of what I was given early on. I really don't. I think that these near death experiences, especially the second one, happened to me for God to, for me to be reminded of who I really am beyond this physical body. And he was showing me another way to live with my earth school lessons in this life. He was showing me this doesn't have to be horrible. This doesn't have to be a nightmare. Let's make this a creative journey. Let's be curious about it. Let's make it, and now my illness is, it doesn't rule my life. I don't talk about it all the time, but I'm very aware that this is what I live with, and I make it a creative, expansive, beautiful, wild, mystical, spiritual journey, and it makes it so much better. Like, it's my life is like the first transplant and how I experienced that in the limited constructs of the medical system, and then me just God giving me these experiences and being like, let's now experience this my way. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh man, like this is so much better. Like, this is just, it frees. I feel like my soul is free, even though I realize the temporary nature of my physical body. And kidney disease is something that could take my life early. And I've already had two transplants. So I mean, I started this journey young, and people who have long-term kidney disease, multiple transplants, you have accumulation of all sorts of, like, things happen as you get older because you've been on this journey for so long. And all I can say is that I cherish every single moment that I have here. But I also actively continue my spiritual awakening process and working on my spiritual life. So when that day does come, I'm fully prepared, and I can cross over into the afterlife, hopefully with flying colors and saying like, look, like I know that this is real, and I'm willing to let go of all of my material attachments because I know that this is the real deal, and but as any human would be, we want to live, we want to be with our family, we're afraid to lose, we will miss people that we love. This is all part of the human experience, so that has to be valued. Our humanity in illness has to be really valued too. But when we cling on to the physical and we have fear and we just can't imagine living without our loved ones, it just makes the process harder, because the reality is, like you said, everybody, nobody's getting out of here alive. And whether it's us or our loved ones, the more we can embrace our natural feelings of loss and allow our humanity to flow and grieve, the more we can also realize, like, they're still here, but in another space. And I can still love them fully. I can still communicate with them in my heart fully. It's just that spiritual nature of the separation that makes us suffer. I heard a long time ago that they were saying that your loved ones in the afterlife can't communicate with you when you're heavily grieving over them because they don't want to make you more sad. So they
Mm.
can't visit you or come to you in a dream if they know that you're suffering. So much love, like they don't want to create any more suffering with you. It's just like if you can be fully relaxed, and at peace, maybe then they'll give you a sign that they're there. So I always say to my niece, she's one of my best friends, my niece, and I always say, this is just our meat suit, and it's
Mhm.
important and it's valuable and we have to take care of it, but we all live beyond this meat suit. And it's so cute that she's adopted that as at a young age to not have that fear, because if we do pass away at some point, you don't really want your loved ones to suffer. You want to tell them, like, I know you'll miss me, but I'm always going to be here to communicate with. Don't ever think that I'm not here. And I think all of this new study in the world of consciousness is really starting to prove more and more and more this whole theory that the consciousness does go through a process of transition, and that there's a physical body death, but something really amazing and miraculous is going on, and it deserves more study and attention. So
Well, what's the quantum physics thing? Energy can never be destroyed. It can only move location or form, sort of
right,
thing.
right,
Yeah.
right. It only shifts form. It doesn't ever dissipate. So, and
Yeah.
I mean, we all know now that, we are electrical, energetic, light beings of light in a weird way. Rudolf Steiner, who's another really interesting character, he talks
Yeah.
about the spiritual hierarchies, and that humans are actually the 10th spiritual hierarchy. So, like seraphim being the highest, right? But if you look at his philosophy, it's humans are angels in training.
Mm-hmm.
We're angels in training now. And you can do this work upon yourself to kind of shift up the spiritual hierarchies. And we've all known people, even on earth, right? We've all known people who are like, wow, they are just a mystical, magical, like they almost seem very ethereal,
Yeah.
unearthly.
Mm-hmm.
So just be mindful. What if angels were really all surrounding us, helping us, and we just somehow don't recognize them because we're caught up in our own little world? So I think there's so much more magic than we realize. And it's hard for the human to conceptualize that which we can't measure and quantify and see, right? We have a hard time with that, but that's the materialistic point of view. And when we open up to the spiritual point of view alongside that material, life becomes a lot more interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Stephanie, is there anything you want to add before we wrap this up?
No, I would just say check out Off the Left Eye YouTube channel. It's
Yeah,
such a
check it out.
beautiful, beautiful, the people who run that channel are just incredibly down to earth and so pleasurable to watch. If anyone watching is suffering or have a death of a loved one or something that they want to try to process, that is the channel to go to. And they talk a lot about Emanuel Swedenborg's books in such a digestible, loving way. So I would say check them out.
Nice, thank
Yeah.
you, as always.
Yeah.
If you want to know more about what Stephanie does or you want to have a consult with her, I'll put in the link below. You can head to kidneycoach.com and then into coaching, and you'll be able to book directly online with there. If you're grappling with chronic kidney disease and wondering where to go next and what to do, then Stephanie is here to walk you through that part of your journey. If you want to know more about what we do, head to www.kidneycoach.com. You'll also find us on social medias under the same place. Make sure you hit subscribe and like. That way you'll get notified anytime we put up new content. And if there's any particular content you would like Stephanie here to talk about, put it in the comments below and we will be sure to add it. Thank you for being part of our community. And Stephanie, as always, thank you for your love, grace and presence and being the incredible person that you are and holding space for people on the kidney journey. I appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.